Hello, thanks for watching this video. My name is Debbie Simons, and my main focus for this case of the murder of Hae-Min Lee is what I consider to be the case against Don Kleindienst, Hae-Min Lee's boyfriend at the time of the murder. So I've done an introductory video about the book, and we will put full ordering information below this video. That's my main focus about this case, which has, of course, been fascinating hundreds of millions of people now for, depending on when you date it from, certainly if you date it from the time of the Serial podcast, well over a decade. But as I delved into this case, I felt that there were three characters on the Adnan Syed side of the case that deserved some attention simply because they're so interesting. So I've made a series of 3 videos. This is the introductory one, and then 3 main videos about the characters of Jay Wilds, Asia McClain, and Hope Shab. And each of these people says something about human nature, about the way our minds work. Asia McClain and her small sidekick, a young woman named Summer, we don't even know her last name. Asia tells us a lot about human memory. She is wrong about the date she says she saw Adnan in the library after school. Jay Wilds got a whole hour's worth of video from me because he is a fascinating study in human motivation, and I find him very interesting. He is also, of course, the stumbling block for many people who really want to believe that Adnan Syed is innocent, and yet their question always is, yeah, but what about Jay? So that's the name of that video. And I think I've answered that question pretty well. What about Jay? No, he did not know a blooming thing. He also had some very complicated motivations concerning Adnan and the jealousy element about Stephanie McPherson. So I hope you'll take a look at that video. It's also interesting with Jay, just as a little side issue here, to imagine what would have happened if Jay had never picked up Adnan's cell phone that day and used it to fool around with and make some calls on his own. The overwhelming consensus is that Jay got pulled into this case only because of those phone calls. When the police traced these calls, they realized Adnan could have not have made them. Who did? And that's how Jay got pulled in. What if he had left that phone alone? And Kevin Urich, the lead prosecutor in the case against Adnan, said very specifically, without Jay Wilds, the cell phone evidence means nothing. Without the cell phone evidence, Jay's testimony means nothing. Neither one of them meant anything, of course. They were both complete baloney. But what if Jay had never been pulled in? There would have been no Serial. There would have been no trial of Adnan. He'd be a man in his mid-40s now, as of course he is, but he would be married, have some kids, probably have had a successful career, and he would still tell the story, I'm sure, today, about that girl he dated back in high school, and then she was mysteriously murdered, but her case was never really solved, because I think that's what would have happened. I don't think Don would have ever been pulled in because the police felt that he'd been cleared. I think eventually what would have been decided was that Hay had been killed by the same person who killed Jada Lambert. And that, of course, turned out to be a man named Roy Sharoney Davis. There were a number of surface similarities between Hay's case and Jada Lambert's case. Jada Lambert had been killed She had been found strangled, raped, and strangled in the woods in the fall of 1998. And then Hay, of course, is found strangled, not necessarily raped, we don't know, in February of 99. And both were 18 years old, seniors in high school in the same area, left school, were never seen alive again, found in the woods, both strangled. So that makes it sound like the two cases are very similar, but actually they're not. Jada Lambert did not leave in a car. She left on foot. Roy Sharoney Davis knew her mother. She was obviously snatched off the street. That's not what happened with Hay at all. But I think Roy Sharoney Davis was already in prison for something else when DNA evidence identified him as the killer of Jada Lambert. There was no, as far as I understand, usable DNA recovered from Hay's body. And so the assumption would have been, well, it has to be Davis. And that, I think, would be the story that we'd have today, except that nobody really would have paid much attention, sadly, because it would not have had this whole mystery, wrongful conviction twist to it. Okay, so Jay is a fascinating person. Asia is a fascinating person. And so is Hope Shab. She is the French teacher of Heyman Lee. She's important for me because it was a little nugget that she apparently knew, to the exclusion of everybody else, that Hay wanted to go live with Don, that set me on this whole path. I would never have delved into this case. I would never have written my book if it hadn't been for that little piece of information that she apparently told some of Hay's friends when they were worried when Hay first went missing. She said Hay and Don were making plans to move in together. And that told me the motive. Not for the murder was unpremeditated, but for the confrontation that led to the murder. But I'm also interested in Hope Shab. She has fascinated me because she's always labeled as somebody who turned against Adnan, and she did nothing of the sort. So I hope you'll watch that third video about her. So here they are, 3 character sketches about people involved in the Heyman Lee murder case.